Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Get Real, Get Wiser. Real estate is noisy right now. Headlines say one thing, brokers say another, and on the ground, it's a different reality altogether. Today, I'm talking with someone who cuts through that noise. He lived commercial real estate from every angle. Will Curtis, welcome, and thanks for joining us on Get Real, Get Wiser.
No, thank you so much for having me.
Before we get into real estate, take me back. What part of your youth, early influences, or personality shaped the version of who shows up in commercial real estate today?
I think some of the things that are maybe more transformative and what a lot of people don't know about me. Right after high school, I actually went to seminary to be a minister, and I think still a lot of kind of what drew me to that lifestyle was the coaching, the teaching, the helping people become more successful, and even going into the military when I was in the service, I found myself doing that same role 20 odd years later as I'm really sitting down doing some soul searching, realizing that's kind of my superpower. That's my why. Watching other people become successful and working with other people to become successful. I think you've got to have some success along the way to do that. But every time I keep turning around in my career, I find myself going back to working either with new agents that are in that process or experienced agents that just need a little bit of tweaking, or even with investors that are working on trying to become the best version of an investor they can be, but more in the real estate mind.
What was it about your childhood that pushed you? Is that straight from the cradle? Is it something that happened to you?
No, like most Christian conversions, it was a girl. In high school, a pretty girl asked me to go to church with her, and I was like, sure. And, it kind of went on from there. Not anything that was, my family wasn't necessarily religious. We didn't do anything, out
Mhm.
of the ordinary. We weren't every, Sunday type church family. It was just kind of as I started, in high school, started kind of moving that direction, and I'm sure my dad was a bit of a coach and an educator in his career field as well. So I'm sure there's some of that kind of transition, and I learned and saw from him. But I mean, there wasn't anything that was just drastic. Like here was a defining moment. It kind of just who I was, and kept seeing that kind of grow, as I've developed and aged.
Are you a born and bred Texan?
I am not. I actually, my dad was military before I was. So we moved
Mhm.
around quite a bit. I was actually born overseas. We moved around every couple of years when he did. Even when he got out of the service, he still moved around a little bit for work until in the early 90s. We were in Seattle. My dad was a contractor for Boeing. Boeing went through the massive
Mhm.
layoffs they had in the Seattle area, and my family grew up in the panhandle of Florida. So, no job, nothing like that. My family decided to move home. I was still a young child. So, more or less, the panhandle of Florida is what we consider home. But shortly
Mhm.
after, graduating, joining the Army, I got stationed at Fort Hood here in Central Texas. Stayed there, wasn't
Mhm.
crazy about it when I first moved here, did my time. And when I decided to get out of the military, or at least kind of step away from the military before maybe going back and get a commission, but at least get my degree. San Antonio was always fun. We always came down here for a long weekend. It was always just enjoyable. So I was like, well, I've always had fun in San Antonio. They got a university here with a real estate finance degree program. Like I can go there for 2 3 years. I'll enjoy the time, and then we'll go back. And honestly, once I got to San Antonio, fell in love with it. About 6 months or so after graduation, I met my wife, who was born and raised from San Antonio. So never thought about leaving really since. She's born, bred here, and more or less home now.
So what made you decide after the Army that real estate was where you wanted to go?
So when I was in the Army, we have a guy. His position's called the Command Financial Specialist, and mostly what his job is sitting down and talking to the young soldier and telling him not to go buy the Ford Mustang for 33%. And here's how to challenge or how to balance a checkbook. Very basic, financial coaching. He had done a presentation, very rich dad, poor dad esque of here's how you invest in real estate. He was an E6, staff sergeant, been in for, made some rank, was making some money, had been in for 20 plus years, and sat down and told us, he goes, I make more in my real estate investments than I do as an E6 of the Army. And I'm sitting here as a young private first class making like 1,200 bucks a month, thinking like, man, this is great money. He's making more money. He's a normal guy. Maybe I can do this as well. That's what kind of got the bug started, was maybe I'm going to go in there. And at that point, all I knew is you could sell houses, you could flip houses. That's all I thought real estate was. So I was taking and reading every Kiyosaki book and every, kind of investor book that's out there while I was deployed, and really learning as much as I could, and decided that the one thing I thought was going to be different was I wanted to have more education than the next investor. So that's where it kind of prompted me to, okay, I'm going to get out of the army. I'm going to go get this degree state. I'm going to be the smartest investor there ever was. I'm going to then go back into the army as an officer, have my commission, still live like an enlisted guy, and basically house hack and do all those things that all the investors typically do. In hindsight, I've never flipped a house. We've never invested in a single family residential home outside of the one we live in. It was not exactly what I expected at all, but once I got into the university, they kind of opened my eyes up to really everything that real estate was, or at least a good chunk of commercial appraisal. And I got hired by a fraternity brother just to answer phones for his family office, and that's quickly turned into me doing property management, me doing leasing, starting to work more in investment sales, and that's really would have never thought I'd ended up in commercial. I didn't know what commercial was, when I was still in the army.
And did you go back to the army after
I
that, or you didn't
I
go?
didn't. I got shot at a whole lot less in real estate, so that was obviously a perk. Not waking up early in the morning, and I kind of liked what we were doing. Once I kind of got in the commercial worlds, kind of seeing the impact that we could have on communities, I enjoyed that aspect of it. I think that's really what's kept me in commercial as long as it has, is that we have huge impacts on our communities. We do our job right. We are helping small businesses find the best location, be successful. Their kids are going to ballet. They're becoming prosperous members of the community. Like, we really have a huge impact. And when I kind of realized that early on, I was like, I want to give this a try for a while. I'm still young enough, at least at the time. I was still young enough. I was still relatively in shape enough that I could get back in the military. I could go commission, and I would be okay if for some reason the civilian world didn't work out. And ultimately, at the end of the day, it never went back. We've looked at it a couple times here and there in a down market. Maybe I can get a steady paycheck again, but no, ever since then, haven't gone back, haven't really looked at going back, and this has been the full-time gig.
So you left the army behind, but certainly there were parts of the army that you brought forward with you into this new world. What did the army teach you about real estate?
I think what was interesting about the army is very young. There's a lot of responsibility thrown on you. And I can remember as I don't know, maybe a sophomore or junior when I was in university, we're going through the career fairs, talking about elevator pitches, all that kind of stuff. So my elevator pitch at the time was something along the lines of, I'm a, transitioning service member that's had $1.2 billion worth of responsibilities and da 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 da, and kind of talking about all that and responsible for, whatever I had, six or whatever soldiers I had. And the person on the other side's like, look, you don't have to lie about what you've done. And I was like, I'm not lying. And Apache is $36 million. I had so many of them, da da da, and it went through the process. And they're like, you were responsible for that much at 23? And I was like, yeah, we all were. I was the least. I was the least capable of my of excuse me. I was the least capable of the group I was with. I had the bottom of the rung, and I think very quickly I kind of realized that there's a lot of responsibility thrown on you very young, where you're responsible for other people's lives, whether or not they live or die. Is a very shell shocking kind of realization. The amount of trust the military puts in you for the amount of dollars that you're responsible for. I think that responsibility early on is what kind of helped shape. So you had to be disciplined. You had to be attention to detail. I was an aviation mechanic. Helicopters don't pull over to the nearest cloud if something goes wrong, right? They fall out of the sky. Those are the things that I think we've kind of pulled in and helped, me transition into real estate and still kind of go back to that training.
Okay, so give us like a quick snapshot, 30 seconds of what you've done in the past in real estate, and then we'll talk about today.
Sure. The 32nd, I started off at a family office. We touched everything. So retail, office. I mean, if we could make money on it, we could make money on it. So we went from there. They ultimately moved the office to Houston. I wasn't necessarily into moving to Houston. I just met my wife and thought she was the one, so I figured I'd stick around. Ended up getting picked up with a Fortune 500 real estate investment trust called Welltower, where I started off in their property management team, and then I moved over to manage the acquisitions and dispositions team. So doing transactions and development all across North America, which was fun, except for the 90% travel. We started having kids, and I stepped into a redevelopment authority for a shutdown Air Force base here in San Antonio, which was one of the really unique times of I had a clearance. I had a lot of knowledge, from the military side. Now working with a shutdown military base that was still supporting the Air Force's mission was a fascinating time in my career. And then I had a CCIM colleague from there pulled me out of the corporate side to be an educator, to basically come in and be the director of education for a KW Commercial franchise. We helped build kind of what KW Commercial is, at least the framework of what it is today. And from there, I moved over to a company, Browning Commercial, where I'm at today, where, we're kind of touching all aspects of real estate, but I have my own personal real estate team as well as an asset management company where, we're mostly focused in right now office, which is a tough market to be in. And we're doing a lot of development sites as well and kind of building out what that looks like in San Antonio currently.
Wow. So you've touched everything. Okay. So you're in commercial real estate every day, retail, industrial, office, medical. What's the real state of the market for people who aren't reading the headlines but actually doing deals?
That's a loaded question. There's a lot going on, and I think the thing that's out there that is kind of in the headlines, but I don't think gets the attention is really where our debt market is right now. So many banks are
Mhm.
either upside down or they've got their risk tolerance is completely out of whack with the way multifamily went when we had the increases in interest rates, and now people are upside down. Office, which has been a staple long-term product for so many people, now is mostly upside down for a lot of properties as well. So I think those two pressures that have come in have hurt things like multifamily again, where we have demand for multifamily. We just don't have the demand for lending for multifamily. You've got retail that's out there that, you know, is starting to come back into a normal, I say more normal through COVID. Nobody wanted to go to retail. Now we didn't build anything. Now we have all this demand and we're starting to, put more demand back on it. But what gets even more troublesome with that is we don't have the debt markets that want to give the money to do these retail developments, which makes it just a little bit more challenging. And then when you start looking at things like industrial's been strong and steady, but I think industrial's ready for a bit of a kind of turmoil as well. It's been doing extremely well, but the thing that's going to be interesting with industrial is we've all heard last mile delivery. What's going to happen in what's going to happen in last mile delivery? And what's interesting coming out of the aviation side of the world is you're really starting to see the idea of drone delivery, basically transportation being done by, at least not yet, but we're starting to see where these quadcopter type Uber transportation routes are starting to be created. Florida just announced one, I think it just last week. I know Texas, we're working on several of them. California's got some things that are going on, but this idea of advanced air mobility is what it's called, is drastically going to change the way I think industrial works and then way some of our transportation models drastically work. It's going to be like the new railroads.
How soon do you think will drone last mile delivery become a reality? I mean, will it be in the next decade, in the next 2, 3 years? How long will that actually take?
I think it's in its infancy right now. So one of the first test beds was actually in Dallas, and it was kind of an interesting play. You have Alliance Field, which is an old airport that Ross Perot had bought for his oil fields. Well, Ross Perot's companies now, they do residential development. They've got a whole bunch of things they do. So they actually built a residential community near the airport and allowed Amazon to test everything they needed to do. They've gone through the FAA to get a lot of the rules and regulations that the FAA need to do. And now I think they're 4 or 5 sites, at least Amazon is at 4 or 5 sites now where they're actually on the ground. We've got one here in San Antonio on the east side that is actually going through that process. I still think it's going to be another decade to two before we see this as something absolutely normal. But I think we are in that infancy of, let's go out there, let's see what's happening. I think Amazon is doing all the hard work. And I think the fun thing is that Walmart is in the background, who took a drone off the shelf, who has they're something like within a 20-mile range. Walmart is within like 87 or 90 odd percent of the population. So Walmart's in a much better position to do last mile delivery than what Amazon is. But I think it's going to be one of those things that's going to be interesting to see how do they go through. I think Amazon's going to pave the way and Walmart's going to come in on all the work they do. And we're going to start seeing that change pretty drastically.
So you think it will actually make an impact on real estate in the next decade?
I think so. I think with that and then the idea of this advanced air mobility of us having basically bus routes in the sky, not true passenger traffic like we see with the airlines, but I think we're going to see a huge change with with the way that would go. There's going to be additional regulations. And I think the real estate professional of today is going to be much more familiar in the next decade or two on what the idea of noise contours are, what FAA regulations are, what a heliport or vertipad actually have to do, what are those regulations. And I can even see from a property management standpoint, we're going to have these property managers now going to be experts or somewhat experts or very specialized experts in areas that have to do with, aviation. In my world, coming from medical office, we have heliports at some of our buildings, some of our hospitals have them. I had dealt with this early on. It was very quickly the like, yeah, you fixed helicopters, you go figure out the heliport, right? Sure, let's figure it out. And honestly, even at the port of San Antonio, we had an airfield there. And it's the same thing. Hey, Will, used to fix helicopters. You can go lease all the hangar space, right? Sure. Till I got to the very first meeting, had no idea what anybody was talking about. But absolutely, I think we're going to see this. It's going to be slow play. It's going to take time, but I think you're going to see it in some of your major markets, in some place like San Antonio, which is a very heavily congested airspace. Once they figure out San Antonio with the military traffic, with the civilian traffic, with the passenger traffic that's here, I think once they figure out how to make it work here in San Antonio, then it's going to be much easier for most of the country. You're still going to have LA and New York and Miami, which are going to be much more condensed airspace. But if you could figure out here where you've got the three modes of transportation and aviation, it's going to be something they can figure out everywhere else.
Let's talk about lease up. You've been very vocal that lease up is where deals live or die now. What changed in the last couple of years?
Desperation? I mean, maybe that's the way to look at it. Multifamily, which I don't do a ton of, but if you look at the multifamily market, I mean, some markets are still on fire, some are absolutely not, but getting good quality tenants in is absolutely necessary. And I think leasing agents, the multifamily side, are have to get more creative. They can't just say, "Hey, here's free rent and come on." They have to get creative. They have to get much smarter on how they target folks. Even in the office side or in commercial in general, I think you have to get a whole lot smarter on how we lease up because as an office owner, you have you don't have the demand that you once had. So you got to figure out what is it that's going to help somebody come in. What are the deal terms that are going to come in? How do you find those individuals faster? And we're jumping into things, static tools like we've always used, demographics and all that kind of stuff, but really now layering AI into our analysis so we can get into that a whole lot faster, find who should be there and getting very more kind of focused, more of a sniper shot of here are the 10, 15 people that would likely be the best fit. Let's put all our effort at those 10 to 15 people versus the three P's of post it online, put a sign in the yard, and pray somebody comes and calls you. I think you have to be much more deliberate on who you're reaching out to and where you're going to find those contacts that really are going to be the best location.
What are some of the secrets that make people come faster, or at least those once you've identified the right ones? Is it just once it's a good fit, it's just a smooth, regular process, or is there some little extra encouragement or incentive that has to be given?
I think each one's different. So if it's, hey, like move your office from here to there, I think that's a different conversation versus you should have a second location. And I think it's really kind of coming down to understanding people, understanding that business owner and what their goals and their needs are. I think we oftentimes, with a lot of sales coaches and that stuff out there, everybody's the same. Just get, if you get enough numbers out there, you're going to get it. And it absolutely does work. But if your marketing is off, then you're missing the boat. I had somebody reach out to me on LinkedIn just the other day, and all they kept talking about was, "Hey, we see you're in the short-term rental space. We see that you're doing all this. How about we talk about your Airbnb portfolio?" I don't own anything in there. They went in, found real
I've
estate.
never seen anything about it.
Yeah, they went in there, found real estate, and were just blowing me up. Well, now if you do that enough, great. Out of 1,000 people, maybe you get one or two that works, and if that's the mindset, great. But the other side of it is that that starts to hurt your personal brand. That's nobody that if I have a term rental question, that's nobody I would go to because they haven't provided value. I was a number to help them get there versus, hey, I saw that you guys have an office building over here. It looks like you got quite a few employees. You've grown over the last 2 or 3 years. How much longer do you have before you guys outgrow that space? Oh, I don't know. Really hadn't thought about that. Well, here's some other options for you. That's a very different conversation of very tailored to you and you build a relationship where I've had people we've reached out to there call me years later, still haven't moved, but they've called me years later because now I'm much more of an advisor than I am
Mhm.
just a salesperson. And now I guarantee you, when they finally say, "Hey, we're ready to pull the trigger to leave," I will be the one that they get the phone call from. I'm the one they call already, but I'll be the one that gets the phone call to, "Hey, we're ready to move. Can you help us?" And part of it's going back and building and maintaining those relationships.
Right. So how do you maintain that over the long term?
I
Long
think
term.
that's tough. I'm an introvert naturally. I know, as vocal and outgoing as I seem on online, I'm naturally an introvert. I don't like people. So for me, that it takes a lot, very dedicated energy to do it. So some of it is social media. Being visible, being seen in social media, engaging with their content.
Mhm.
Some of we I don't say automate. We have some tools in the background where my admin goes and we have a hit list of, hey, here are the people that we want. If they post something, let me know they post something so I can jump in there and I can comment, I can engage with them. If it's something, hey, we just opened our new location, she may post, hey, congratulations, this is awesome, something a little more generic. But if it's really something that takes some thought, we're deliberately going out there trying to engage across all platforms where our customers ultimately are, not just LinkedIn, but Instagram, TikTok, wherever we can. I think it's going out there and being deliberate and trying to be where they are and then being genuine. For me,
Wow, I've never heard that. I mean, you're turning LinkedIn on its head. Everybody's trying to attract people to them, and you're using it as a tool to go to do outreach to the people that you want to see as customers.
Absolutely. I think that builds a relationship so much more. And I can say early on, we got a lot of leads just from what we posted. Once that algorithm kind of changed a little, we realized that wasn't working. So we get more leads now in somebody else's comment section than we do from what we post. We make sure that we get it out there. We make sure that something's there. So we have people that are talking and communicating with us, there. But really, a lot of the relationship comes from the conversations that are in the discussion or turn to the chat message, after, two or three iterations. That's where the real relationships go. And to me, that's the goal. And even my admin, that's what we kind of start tracking is how many of these conversations do we have versus how many actually get to either a, instant message or turn to a phone call. That's where we want to be because that's where the relationships truly happen. And then using systems like a CRM and those things to remind you of what's going on, when to reach out. Hey, it's been a while to reach out, and have those things remind you. I mean, it reminds me of my wife's birthday. It reminds me of its anniversary. We use it for all that already. Remind you of when the last time you talked to a client. That way, you got to have 3,000 4,000 people you're typically working with on a regular basis. You're not going to remember everything about every conversation you had. So these are the tools that absolutely work and help you build that relationship.
That's a great lesson for all those people out there using LinkedIn. So, when you're advising a client, an owner on a commercial space today, retail, industrial, or office, what's the first thing you look at to understand whether the deal is real or fantasy?
I, I think I have a different view on this than others. And for me, it's operations. And maybe I'm biased coming from a property operations background, but I really think brokers do a great job of selling the dream, but not how to actually make the dream happen. And I think oftentimes property managers can't sell a dream because they're too busy trying to fix everything to make sure it works. And I think there's a blend in there. So we get an investor that's looking at a property. The first thing we can make the numbers do what we need to make them do, but we really dive into the operations. Who are the vendors they have? What are those increases in the vendors? Are they getting good quality for the price that they're getting? Is there things in their operational plan that are making the most sense? Because at the end of the day, as a broker, I can tell you this is going to give you a 35% IRR, but as the operations teams that are going to have to actually sit out there and actually run that property to make that happen to see if they actually hit goals. So we really dive into the operations. I can run the financials in 45 minutes to an hour. Too easy. We can do that. I mean, AI is getting to the point now where it's doing almost just as good. You put in the right data, it's almost getting pretty close to it as well. Running the numbers isn't going to be the issue. It's going to be the actual boots on ground operations of, again, do I have the right janitorial vendor? Am I set up on the right expense structure? Did I give away too much in some of these leases that now are coming back and biting me in the rear? And how do I turn around and change that? Those are the operational issues that really make or break investments.
So, is that something you do? You dive deep into the operations and tell them what the plan? I mean, you create a plan, an operations plan for the property manager.
To an extent. So there's two aspects of it. We're just working with an investor. Then we're going to look at and kind of look at overall and kind of give them a brief. Hey, here are the things that may derail you. Here are the things you would probably work at. Here are the things that might be something to keep in mind. And then we have a consulting arm as well, where we come in and we'll do this for other investors. We'll come in, deep dive. We'll actually go hang out at the property for half a day, which is ultimately what I did at the REIT when I was working there. I just wore a polo shirt and blue jeans. I sat in a lobby of an office building all day and just watch how it runs. I mean, fascinatingly boring work, but we'd sit down and watch how it ran, how often janitorials coming by, when security's taking a look. We're looking at all those aspects of how does a property actually run, and then we can start to identify, here are the issues you're going to run into, here are the things that probably are going to be issues for you long term if this or that happens to happen. And then also looking at property managers as well. A lot of folks will take property management in-house, and I get it, property management is expensive, but they'll take property management in-house but not have the tools, the training, the resource. They're hiring their buddy because they play golf with them to go do janitorial or to go do landscaping, but not necessarily getting the right bid or the right team in place that are really going to take that property to the next level. So we have the two aspects, very brief look at it if we're working on it, or we have the consulting arm where it really is a full on evaluation of the existing management plan and how else we can turn around and improve the operations.
What are like the top things that you see derail good deals or potentially good deals from the operation standpoint?
Terrible vendors, I think, is a lot of it. And with vendors, I'm going to lump property managers in there a little bit. We all naturally want to do what's easiest, right? You got good relationships. It's easier to keep the guys you've had in there for a while. And I think sometimes the unwillingness to go out and rebid or competitively rebid contracts become such an issue. We had a property I managed, I took over from another manager years ago when I got hired right around Christmas time, and when we came in for Christmas time, there were probably, I mean, $3,000 worth of gifts and booze and everything else that you could imagine that came from all the vendors. That property ended up being almost $300,000 over budget because they weren't managing, and the only way to, hey, we screwed up, sorry, here's another bottle of wine, and they bought their way into the contract. Well, that's playing the property manager's making out like a bandit, but that's turning around and hurting the bottom line of the business. That's hurting the tenants. That's hurting the long-term success of a property. So a lot of times it's that property manager and that tenant, or sorry, that property manager and the vendor relationship of, do they hold them accountable? Can they buy their way out of it? Are they going to lunch or happy hour with them on a regular basis? And are you truly competitively bidding a property out where the vendors know, hey, are you just bidding because you have to, or are you bidding because you're really looking to bring somebody else on? It, to me, that's one of the biggest things we run into is just expenses getting away because, property managers are being, taken care of and treated well, ultimately hurt the tenants and hurt the investment.
Okay, switch gears to talk about teaching a little bit.
Sure.
You clearly love teaching commercial real estate. What's the concept you wish every new investor or broker had in their head before they step into a deal?
Oh, that's a good question. I think if we were to look at everything, it's understanding the demographics and the psychographics of a population and making decisions based off of that. And sometimes that can get us in our kind of more political mindset that can get us a little bit in trouble. But I tell the story all the time. So I obviously pasty white guy. My wife is a Latina. When we moved in together, we were basically making about the same amount of money. We're about a year and a half or so apart from each other in age, more or less outside of gender and ethnicity. We're more or less the same person demographically, but the psychology of how we grew up, the psychology of who we were different. So when she gave me the list to go to the store to go buy everything, the mop, the broom, all the stuff that you need on the list, she just wrote floor cleaner. So I went out there and I bought Pine Sol. Why? Because that's what marketing did to me. Marketing said Pine Sol was floor cleaner. A clean floor smells like pine. My wife, my Latina wife, when I came in, she goes, "What in the hell is this?" And I was like, "What's Pine Sol?" And she's like, "I wanted Fabuloso. Why didn't you grab Fabuloso?" And I'm like, "I don't know what a Fabuloso is." I had no idea because the way they marketed, the psychology of who they were going after, I wasn't Fabuloso's target market. So, but it was my wife's. So if we approach real estate the same way, who is the psychology of the people in this community that are going to use this? Just because there's a gap in the market doesn't mean that that population is going to have the right business or the right tenant that's in there. And from an investment standpoint, I think it's extremely important as well as understand who the population is around where you're investing so that you bring in the right tenants, you attract the right tenants, or you know that the tenants in your building are probably not going to be the good ones long term. While you're expecting everybody to stay, you may just have a mismatch of who's there versus what the population in and around the area is. I think that's the biggest miss a lot of investors and a lot of leasing agents really miss by it's full, they'll stay.
Most people are thinking numbers and all kinds of things, but people are not thinking a little bit deeper like you do.
I mean, the numbers are important. I mean, I don't want to take away from that.
Oh,
Absolutely. If you pencil, it doesn't pencil, but these additional assets that come in that you've got to go and
right.
sure up what these numbers are going to be long term.
So you've spoken openly about work-life balance struggle in this business. You talk about it all the time, not only here, but you talk about it on LinkedIn. What part has been the hardest for you personally?
I think this is the negative thing coming from the military, and something I think I've struggled with. In the military, you don't go home till the job's done. And when it comes to mindsets, I think my clients love it that we're going to be continually working until the job's done. Absolutely going to keep doing it. From a personal side, it runs you out. It wears you down, and I'm blessed to have a wife who is forceful enough to tell me to knock it off, that I need to take some time off. But I know that coming from the military, that's naturally just the way that we ran and operate for so long. So I think it's you've got to be best for your clients, to be best for your agents or whoever you're working with. You've got to focus on you for a little bit and find that time. And I still struggle with this. I have not figured out the secret sauce. I know when my wife finally really gets mad at me, I need to take some time off and moving into December because she finally got mad at me recently. But it's finding that time that you can recharge and make sure that you focus on you, but also carving out the time for family. So for me, I would get done with the office. I would come home. I've got 1,000 other things to get done. Well, you got kids. You like them, right? Well, yeah, of course I love my kids. Well, you spend time with me. Well, yes, ma'am. Of course I'm going to spend time with you. And now rephrasing where some of that goes. Of course, there's last minute things that come up. You got a big deal you're working on. I think it's finding that balance there, but truly finding and making sure that you're important to the people that show up in life. I think that's the important thing. You can provide everything for them. Are you still there providing? Sorry, you can provide everything physically for them, but are you still able to provide the emotional support that they need? And is your emotional bandwidth already too short because of everything you dealt with in the day? And I wish there was a silver bullet. I wish it was easier, but I know that's a struggle I have on a regular basis of trying to balance providing for my family, both financially, but also emotionally and spiritually.
I can give you the advice that my wife always tells me. She says, "Why do you wait till I'm mad? Why don't you just listen to me 3 stages before that?"
It's because I'm not listening. I mean, that's some of it. But she's absolutely right. It's great advice, you know. But I think your wife is probably like mine. She's not kind of smacking in the head, going, "Hey, listen." It's very sweet. Hey, here it is. Okay, yeah, I'm aware. And then not until she finally gets mad, you're like, "Oh yeah, I should have been paying better attention."
Yeah, it doesn't register until the volcano
That's right.
erupts.
That's right.
Let's talk about Texas for a minute.
Okay.
Texas is, at least the media that I watch, always been the best place, the greatest place. But you do see from people out of Texas that Texas is not all roses. What's really going on in Texas? What's good? What's less good? And where are we going over there?
I have no idea what you're talking about. Texas is the best state there ever is. No,
There you go.
no. I mean, Texas isn't without its troubles. I think there are things in our politics that become attractive or less attractive depending on which side of the aisle you are, and that plays into the investment, that plays into business. And while there are the positives, I think the balancing that there are negatives that come along with it as well. Again, we are very one-sided politically statewide, and that has been one of the things that's kind of hurt our arts or our TV industry. We're still trying to grow it. It's something that the state is trying to push, but the politics doesn't necessarily mesh sometimes. And I think it's one of the things we've got to kind of mess with and find that balance of how are we attracting the right businesses, how are we attracting it in, but also keeping the voter base happy with what the direction that we're going. I know we took a lot of criticism in COVID because the jokingly said COVID didn't happen in Texas. Like we stayed open, we still ran, for really we didn't really we shut down, but it really didn't really shut down. Business was still open, and there was a lot of pushback from the health side of it, and we had probably more deaths than we probably needed to because of it. But if you look at the economy, we still stayed relatively strong because we didn't really shut down. And I think finding that balance of being so pro business is almost like the work life balance conversation. We're so great, at least for Texas, being great at pro business. I think sometimes we forget some of the social aspects that are going to be important to many of the people that may be coming in. I think Austin is a good case study of what we've seen recently. And if you look at, Austin compared to the rest of the state, Austin is definitely that dark blue spot compared to everything else in Texas. They did an amazing job of attracting tech talent, attracting so many things in. But what we're seeing now is a lot of that is leaving Austin. And we're starting to see that reversal a little bit from Austin, where they did a great job of promising everything, but they didn't do as good of a job as delivering. Still, they've got some of the folks that are there. They've still got that coming in, but it's having an impact where even if you look at housing prices, the average or median housing price as kind of an indicator of how well they're doing, Austin was up to about $700,000 for a median home price when Dallas, San Antonio, and Houston were in the mid 300s to low 400s. They were easily $200,000 above everybody else. Austin is
Mhm.
now starting to come back, but you've also seen the headlines for Austin. You've seen layoffs, you've seen relocations, you've seen businesses that did come here that were big wins now step up and go elsewhere. There's a lot of positives that Austin has going for it. Delivering what the promise was, I think, is one of the things that Austin specifically struggle with. And I think not just Austin, they're easy target to look at. I'm San Antonio. We're supposed to make fun of Austin, but I think it's something that as a lesson learned, we're seeing some of the other major metro areas as well. As we can promise it, we just got to make sure that whatever we promise, we can actually deliver.
So is Texas still the greatest state to invest in
I would say
from
yes.
a real estate
I
standpoint?
mean, I do boast my business in Texas, so absolutely. I would say there's positives for Texas, absolutely. But I think the if you're a big institutional investor, you're going to have property everywhere. And if you're looking for that risky, I'm going to make a ton of money on a project, Texas may not be that right market for you. But if you're looking for long term,
Mhm.
steady, relatively steady growth, Texas is probably a little bit of a better market. I know when I worked for the REIT, we jokingly said, okay, we're going to buy something in California, we're going to buy something in Texas, we're going to buy something in New York, we're going to buy something in Texas to balance out that risk of the portfolio. California, New York were going to make
Right.
us all the money. Texas was going to make sure that we kept paying that dividend the right way at the right time. So I think it's a balanced
Right.
approach. San Antonio, we joke that our highs aren't that high, our lows aren't that low. We're pretty long term steady. We were back to pre COVID numbers relatively quick after well before the rest of the country, but it's because our dip wasn't nearly as bad as what other parts of the country happen to be. So there's the pros and the cons of if you're looking for big returns, if you're looking for long-term steady investment. I think it really depends on what you as an investor is looking for.
Well, that was great. You shed a lot of light for us on so many different topics, and I appreciate that. What lesson have you learned clearly? Some challenge that you had that you've overcome and it's far back in the rearview mirror today?
I don't know about far back. I think one of the things that I struggled with, especially in my post-military career, was really finding out the who I am and making sure I'm coming on authentically. We sat down and spent a lot of time, paid for coaches, paid for all those things to really kind of sit down and dive in, just to realize that naturally I go back to being the teaching, the coach, the consultant. And that's what I naturally go back to in every career field I've been in. And I think once I've realized that, once I've embraced that, as long as I keep that focused, we grow and we do great things. The moment I kind of try to be more of the broker, try more of the salesperson, we fall on our face. And as long as I've kept that in mind, that I'm really the coach, the teacher, the consultant, that's been the biggest challenge that I think we've figured out, and really just finding to be authentically me.
Your success, would you attribute it to luck, leadership, or choice?
Yes. I mean, I think there's an aspect of all of it, right? I got a career in real estate because I was lucky enough to join a fraternity because I was walking by and was like, this might be fun. That put me in a career field that I absolutely love and was a great fit. So there was absolutely luck involved that if I didn't get to know this fraternity brother, I wouldn't be where I am. I'd probably be finishing up my military career, at this point now, not knowing, what it is. As it comes to, you know, choice or being in the right place. I mean, I think you deliberately try to put yourself in those right locations, and I think there's some strategy to put yourself in the right rooms. So I think yeah, all three come into play. That it's not just one or the other. It's really a combination of all three.
Well said. And lastly, what would you like your lasting legacy to be when they remember you over time? What do you want them to think of Will Curtis?
The tough one because this is something I've been asked a few times more recently. A question like this, and I don't know if I have an answer. I think I'm still trying to figure out what does that really look like. I think if I had to put an answer to it, it's that I impacted other people's lives. I think that's really the fact that my business or my personal life or whatever the case is better because I knew Will invested in my life.
Thanks, Will. Really nice meeting you in person
Likewise.
or through the screen. Thanks for joining. That's another episode that we're going to wrap of Get Real, Get Wiser. Until next time, thanks again, and thanks to all the listeners out there. Have a great day.